All right, let's get to what's going on in the National Football League. And we expected this, Chris, last week when the NFL suggested it would allow teams to gather in groups of up to 10 for the draft. And then people started saying to me, well, wait a minute, how does that comply with the stay-at-home orders that are now in place in most states? Well, it doesn't. And I asked the league that question, and they never answered. And, of course, they don't like to answer the questions that are going to entail them saying, oops, maybe we got over our skis a little bit on this. And they did. So the end result, no one is going anywhere for the draft. Everyone will be at home. A virtual draft announcement made by Commissioner Roger Goodell yesterday in a memo sent to all teams. In response to developing conditions and the advice of medical and public health experts, clubs have been advised to prepare to conduct the 2020 draft entirely outside of their facilities and in a fully virtual format with club personnel in separate locations and able to communicate with one another and draft headquarters by phone or internet. We want all NFL personnel to comply with government directives and to model safe and appropriate health practices. See, there were two issues here, as I see it, Chris. Number one, you have to comply with the stay-at-home orders. And unless you can get some sort of dispensation in every state where the NFL does business, because now Missouri finally has caught up with the rest of the free world and shut everyone down. Every state where the NFL does business has a stay-at-home order. Number one, you got to comply, and you got to find a way around it if you can, and obviously they couldn't. And secondly, it's just a bad look. Everybody else has to work at home. The NFL isn't entitled to any type of special treatment, and also it sends a message. Like if it's you either comply, right, or you spend your time trying to come up with ways to get out of your house and ways to do the things you want to do. Well, no, the whole idea is stay home. If you can in any way, shape, or form, stay home. So it's a good example of the NFL's setting. It's a smart thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And I applaud them for realizing, even if it came 6 days too late, that they can't pull this off by allowing club officials to congregate.
Yeah, it's the right thing to do. I mean, honestly, Mike, I think sometimes, you writing letters to the league, us talking about it on the show, almost helps them come up with like, hey, we need to formulate a plan. People are going to start talking about this, and we got to figure it out. So you're amazing at that. That's the first thing I wanted to say. Okay, that's enough of the.
It doesn't make up. It doesn't make up for what you said about my athletic ability.
That's enough. Yeah, you're still a bad athlete, but whatever. But yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this from the get-go, right, Mike? I mean, hey, there's people tuning into NFL coverage on a daily basis. They look at these people as leaders, people they look up to. If they see Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones and Mike McCarthy in a meeting room, it might embolden certain people to say, "Oh, what's the big deal? I'll roll the dice and go over to my buddy's house across the street, and it's only two of us. We'll watch the draft together, whatever it may be." So, yes, it's the right thing to do by the NFL. It's good to see they have formulated this plan, and ultimately, Mike, I don't know if it's going to throw huge hiccups as far as what teams need to do on the day of the draft, other than a few circumstances here and there. But I think you should be able to run business as usual, with these, teleconference digital video sessions.
Yeah, I mean, the key is planning for all potential contingencies, rehearsing, practicing, having an idea of how the labor will be divided, who will be responsible for talking to which teams about possible trades. You just need to have your network in place, and you need to have one conductor who's in charge of everything to make sure that all of the various tentacles are doing what they're supposed to do, especially as the time approaches to being on the clock. There is a concern, though, that John Harbaugh, the Ravens coach, pointed out yesterday, and I think we've brought it up in the past. The possibility that someone could hack something, that someone looking to gain an advantage can find out what the Ravens are talking about or some other team are talking about by maybe slipping into their Zoom teleconference and video conference undetected. And, look, we know enough about the way the NFL has operated over the years to assume that someone will try to develop an advantage in this situation, not just merely take care of their own business, but push it a step farther and try to interfere with someone else's business. And I hope if someone gets caught doing that, they get the biggest punishment we've ever seen, because now isn't the time to try to exploit the situation. But, Chris, do you think this is a legitimate concern the team should be worried about?
I don't think it is. I think that's being a little paranoid. I understand. I mean, you want to cross every T, dot every I, make sure you're secure here and information's not getting out. I understand that. So now maybe, he puts that on the radar of the NFL once again here to where maybe they can find out some system where they have security checks here through this whole thing, however it may be. But you're right. I mean, that would be the low blow of low blow to do something like that during these times when, things are not normal and you might not have all the normal checkpoints in place, let alone we've had some political issues with, this has become a topic of our culture anyways, to where let's just stay away from that topic, anybody in the NFL. Let's not hack into anybody's system and try to steal information. So, I don't look at that as a big deal. Mike, the one thing that jumped out to me right away, just because, hey, I've been in New England during draft day. I've walked into Tampa, during draft day a few times as a player there just to check it out. Here's one aspect that really kind of jumped out to me. You get into the middle rounds of the draft, 4th, 5th, 6th round. Sometimes you got guys on your board that are so close, right, Mike? Let's say it's running back A and running back B. All right. They're really close. And you're going, wow, we're getting close here to pick 110. And both of these running backs are going to be available to us. Hey, let's throw in the tape real quick and watch 40 plays of each guy. And let's just talk it out and see which we want to go with. You might lose that aspect here with the video conferencing in the draft where, hey, Pete Carroll and John Schneider and a few other scouts, they all want to talk and compare two guys, right, that they're really close on the board. Now that may become difficult with the video. And you, of course, not going to have the film access as be able to everybody to see and kind of discuss the player and the positives and negatives of that. That was one thing that jumped out to me right off the bat.
But if they have a setup where they're all communicating in real time,
right.
Couldn't somebody pop up the play and they all could see it? I mean, this gets into, Chris, what every team needs to be doing and should have been doing all along. Because, look, anybody who was paying attention to this knew there was no way in hell it was going to be a normal setup, that everyone was going to be at home. So the teams that spent the time identifying, and this is what I've said the NFL needs to do generally, but the teams, the smart teams, would be doing this specifically, identify every what if, every wrinkle, every angle. Here's what we ordinarily would do in the draft room. How do we simulate that? Here's another thing we ordinarily would do in the draft room. How do we simulate that? And you've touched on something very basic, very simple, very important. And the smart teams, and I'd like to think all teams are smart enough to figure this out, will come up with a way to allow coach, GM, whoever else has their hand in the stew, to look at some last-minute film of this guy versus that guy as they try to decide which of the two they're going to take when they're finally on the clock.
Yeah, you would hope that would be in place. And, again, I'm not Mr. Technology, but, the teams have the foresight to maybe have a more impressive, improved type of teleconference system to where they could link it up, from the coach's house to, the pro personnel to the GM guy, better than maybe a Zoom. I'm saying something more even high end that way. The teams have the foresight to maybe get ahead of the storm there and set that up. I don't know, but again, I just think it's going to be a hell of a draft for a lot of reasons. And the other thing too, Mike, I think there's not too many cooks in the kitchen for too many teams. I think when we see a draft day rooms more times than not, we see a lot of people in that room, but more times those people are really just there to enjoy the scenery and be a part of it. But as I experienced and ever saw, like in Tampa or New England, as I talked about, there's only 4 or 5 people that are talking on the day of the draft. Everybody else, they might as well be. When I was in New England, we were all watching on TV outside the draft room. We didn't know what was going on. We were just reacting like all the other fans. Whoa, we picked him? I can't believe that. What are we doing, right? I mean, that's truly what we were doing because it was the pro personnel, the GM, the head coach, the owner, maybe the head of college scouting. And that was all, that was it. And that's really all that needs to be involved for the most part in these video conference calls when it comes to the draft, unless you want to call maybe an area scout just to get a little more of a inside tidbit on the guy's personal life off the field.
Yeah, I think that it creates an urgency and I think a wisdom to take the various people who are there to do a certain job and give them a specific task and know when you're going to call on him. Basically, that's why I said you need a conductor. You need somebody who knows. We need this. Here's who we go to. We need this. Here's who we go to. Instead of having a room full of people and just shouting out, can somebody find X? You know in advance who's responsible for that. You know in advance who's responsible for this. And I think the smart teams are going to find a way to do this the right way. They're creative, they're organized, and they're going to get the thing put in a right spot for them to get the most out of this experience. All right, a couple of other things that came out of this memo that weren't expressly said, Chris. First of all, it's obvious that the commissioner is going to be at home. He's not going to make the trip to ESPN or anywhere else to a TV studio. It screams out from the text of this memo, even though he doesn't say it, there's no way he can leave his home when he's telling everyone else connected to the NFL that they have to stay in their home. And secondly, what also screams out from between the lines of this memo, when you consider the acknowledgement that many of these stay-at-home orders now extend into June, and the idea that everyone has to be on equal footing, you can't have different sets of rules for different teams. I think it's just a matter of time before they tell us there's no off-season program whatsoever, and we'll see everybody when it's time to show up for training camp, whenever training camp opens.
Yeah, I think we're at that. I think a lot of, listen, my friends that I talk to in the NFL right now, Mike, they don't expect this to be a normal season. I think they're all looking at it right now, just hoping that maybe we can get into start training camp mid and late August, and that it's going to be a shortened season. I don't think anybody is really expecting things to be totally normal. Hopeful, optimistic, wishing for it, sure, but things aren't normal. And you know what? Pete Demolitis, right? One of our producers there, he made a good point, and this is going on to what you said about the film and being able to, compare a player here and there. I know Frank Reich had publicly made comments lately that he was holding some coaching meetings through Zoom with his coaches to draft evaluate. And I know that's going on around the NFL too. So, to your point, yes, that should be able to get done then if you had to compare two players that were very close on your board and you want to make one final look and one final decision.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.